particular seva. Thank you so much. So before we get started, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatam Aham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. Hope you all are able to see the screen. I've just started sharing. Prabhu, my voice is okay? You're able to hear? There is no problem?
Yes, Prabhuji. It is audible, Prabhuji.
Okay. Thank you. So this is the shloka that we are going to do today, 5:14:37. So this is all in prose. So I'll just read the verse and then we'll look at the synonyms and the translation and purport. Evam vita vyatisanga vivruddha vairānubandho api purva vasanaya mitha udvahati atapavahati. Evam vita vyatisanga vivardha vairānubandho api purva vasanaya mita udvahati atapavahati. Evam vita vyatisanga vivardha vairānubandho api purva vasanaya mitha udvahati atapavahati. So the synonyms are evam, in this way, vita vyatisanga, because of monetary transactions, vivritha, increased, vaira anubandaha, having relationships of enmity, api, although, purva vasanaya, by the fructifying results of previous impious activities, mitaha, with each other, udvahati, become united by means of the marriage of sons and daughters, ata, thereafter, apavahati, they give up the marriage or get a divorce. Translation. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai. Although people may be enemies, in order to fulfill their desires again and again, they sometimes get married. Unfortunately, these marriages do not last very long and the people involved are separated again by divorce or other means. The purport. As stated previously, every conditioned soul has the propensity to cheat, even in marriage. Everywhere in this material world, one conditioned soul is envious of another. For the time being, people may remain friends, but eventually they become enemies again and fight over money. Sometimes they marry and then separate by divorce or other means. On the whole, unity is never permanent. Due to the cheating propensity, both parties always remain envious. Even in Krishna consciousness, separation and enmity take place due to the prominence of material propensities. Hare Krishna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So seeking the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, Prabhus and Matajis who are here. So kindly bless me so that I'll be able to do some justice to these wonderful verses that we are seeing. I'm doing this as a service to the Guru Parampara for the pleasure of the Lordships and for my own purification. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So we are actually in the 14th chapter, like you all know. And I think 14th chapter is a very interesting chapter, actually. So people would have covered this earlier also. It is titled Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. So material world, we know there is enjoyment or there's a lot of enjoyment. So we're aware of that. But one thing that we generally tend to ignore is that why is it compared to a forest? So what is that quality of the forest which we'll have to take note of? Forest is full of danger. A forest from at a distance might be very nice. If you're looking down from an aeroplane or if you're looking at a picture or a movie, then it looks very nice and wonderful. And you might even dream of having a home and things like that. But then, because it is nature, etc. But then we should also be aware that once we are actually inside the forest, then the only thought is to get out of it because it's full of dangers. So there are so many wild animals. There are so many impediments that are there. So this particular analogy or this particular phrase, forest of enjoyment, is very much applicable to the material world. Because we think it is good or there is a lot of good things, but then it is also coming with a package of danger or, all these it's full of dangers and tribulations. It's a cause for many suffering and so on and so forth, mental, physical, always. So this is, and then if you look at these verses, if you recall, the verses that we have been seeing, these verses, there's one particular thing is, it's a conversation that is happening between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadev Goswami. And this is actually after the narration of the Bharat Maharaj story. So where he was a king and then how he had to fall down because of his thoughts when he was leaving the body. He was thinking of the deer. And then from there, then he's born as a deer. And then as a deer, how he protected himself. And thereby, then by the mercy of the Lord, then he got another human body, which was again Bharat, but it was called as Jada Bharat because he did not want to take association of the material world. And then he goes on to meet King Raghugana, and then, there is this interaction that happens because of an unpleasant episode where he was blamed for not carrying the palanquin properly. So because of that, then there is an interaction that happens, an altercation that happens with the king, and then he realizes he was a great soul, and then there is revelation that happens for King Raghugana. So now in that particular thing is actually summarized very well. There were around, I think, from chapter 7 onwards up till chapter 12 or 13, this is going on, where there is this detailed descriptions of the teachings of Jadabharata to King Raghugana is also there. And then in the end of the 13th chapter, if you look at how it is concluding, we'll see how Parikshit Maharaj is asking Sukadev Goswami. He says, my dear Lord, oh great devotee, sage, you are omniscient. That means you know everything. And you have very nicely described the position of the conditioned soul, who's compared to a merchant in the forest. So that forest comparison was already done. And from these instructions, intelligent men can understand that the senses of a person in the bodily conception are like rogues and thieves in that forest. And one's wife and children are like jackals and other ferocious animals. However, it is not very easy for the unintelligent to understand the purport of the story because it is difficult to extricate the exact meaning from the allegory. So sometimes, an allegorical reference could be missed by an unintelligent person. So actually, Parikshit Maharaj is putting a stop to the flow that is happening, and then he's saying that, therefore, I request Your Holiness to give me the direct meaning. That's how the 13th chapter ends, and then the 14th begins. That's the chapter that we are in. And in the 14th chapter, then Sukadev Goswami goes on. He doesn't no holds barred, so to speak, where he goes on and then he is giving directly the how one has to understand this material world. No sugarcoating, no allegory, nothing of that sort. So sometimes, some people might find this 14th chapter. I mean, why some people? All of us, we might find it a little hard hitting, but that's how it is meant to be, and that is how these verses, the synonyms, the meanings, all of them are so direct. And Prabhupada has done a very wonderful, in his purports, he has so wonderfully brought out the essence and how we need to understand it and so on. So in that connection, today actually we are looking at the vivaha, or the marriages, how that is happening in the material world. See, in fact, just before that, if you have to look at the various comparisons, I mean, it is so direct that, in the forest, there are rogues and thieves. So there is this comparison of the senses to the rogues and thieves. So you have to be fearful of them. You have to be afraid of them. You have to be cautious of them and try to avoid them. So taking care in that way. And then wife and children, that is the family, the immediate family members, are compared to jackals and hyenas and tiger, because they are out to get you, get your skin. I mean, all the hard work and earning, and then they end up, you end up spending on them, that kind of a thing. So this is for not exactly grihasthas, but for grihamaidis, So then mosquitoes, rats, there is so much of disturbances that are there, and so on and so forth. If you look at each of these purports, and then the meaning, then it is so hard hitting. Monkeys, there are these bogus gurus who are compared to monkeys, and then who jump around here and there. So the conclusion is that, there are there is this obvious attachment to family life, which has to be looked at in the right perspective. The attachment to the senses. Then there is also this attachment to material wealth, and then possessions. And then there is this attachment to wealth, as in there is a specific description of the wealth. It says that there is attachment to gold, and then gold is compared to yellow stool. So there's so much of attachment to the yellow stool. So this is how direct Sukadeva Goswami is in this particular chapter. And then there is also this attraction towards the opposite sex, that is pramada. And so the conclusion in all of this we can see is how we are blinded by it. And then one of the acharyas was saying how there are many types of blindness that one can have. There are 4 types of blindness that is there. So one of them is, of course, the physical blindness, which is not having the eyes or the eyesight. So thereby you're blind, you're not able to see. Then there's another type of blindness is where you have the eyes, but then your senses or the sense gratification is so strong that you're blinded to many things. So that's another type of blindness. Then there is also this pride which is there in all of us, and that blinds us. So that's the third type of blindness, which is with respect to pride. And the fourth one is with respect to poverty. So sometimes poverty or the acuteness of the poverty is so strong that we are blinded by certain things. So you may not hesitate. You might try to ignore certain things, like they ignore the dangers of stealing and cheating, and then go ahead because you are poor. There is poverty and then you want money. So we've seen that. So we've seen people do that. And so poverty sometimes makes us go blind to the obvious things or to the good things or to the dharma shastras that are there, and then how things are enjoined in this dharma shastra, that how one has to live one's life. But then we are blind, we turn blind to those because of these things, the four types, which is physical blindness. Then because of sense gratification, the urge is so strong that we are blinded. And then because of pride, the ego is so strong that we don't see the obvious. And then because of poverty. So these are the various types of blindnesses that we need to be aware of. And these things are all explained in this particular chapter so wonderfully. So point number one is it is mixed. There is danger, there is enjoyment. We think there is enjoyment, but there is a lot of danger. So it comes as a bundle. So I mean that we are aware of, So whenever there is anything good, any good news, there's always this bad news that is accompanied with it, and so it goes together, hand in hand. So it is like this is example that they give, like you think you are eating an ice cream and then suddenly you come across sand particles in it because ice cream is mixed with sand, so it's not so soft. And then the moment you come across, your tongue comes across this sand, then there is revulsion, or you don't want it, you want to spit it out. But otherwise, you know that the ice cream is relishable and then it has to be swallowed. So like this, we can see how material world is being condemned, or it is being given the proper perspective. And this perspective is something that we are discussing in all these verses. And then, okay, there's another thing that happens is, okay, there is enjoyment, which is there, and then we are having this propensity to enjoy. But we also know that in the material life, whatever we want, we don't get because we don't have the qualification for it, or for whatever reason. I mean, that's the only primary reason. But whatever we think is the reason, other than this particular one, we hold somebody as a cause for having come in between me and my enjoyment, and so on and so forth. So because we don't have this particular view, the broad view of nothing unfair that exists or that is happening to me in this world, because it is all based on my purva karmas, and how I'm just getting what I deserve. But then I want but my desire and what I deserve, there is a gap. And this gap we try to bridge with all our effort. But we know that it will fail, because we will only ultimately get what we deserve and not what we desire. But the desire still is strong. So what happens is we become little exploitative. We try to somehow or the other, ena kena, that is santushta ena kena. So we want to be happy somehow or the other. So we try to exploit the others. So this exploitation is the cheating propensity that is there. And this particular thing is coming up because, there are these four defects that are there. Firstly, what are the four defects? One is that we are always in Maya. Because we are in Maya, what happens? We don't know who we are, or we think that we are this body. And so I am this body, and then the Maya means forgetfulness of Krishna. So Krishna is not in any of the thought process that is there for a person who is engulfed in Maya. So because the Supreme Lord is not there, then whatever he or she sees thinks that it is his or hers for taking. So they want to acquire things. They say, like, I am the Lord of all that I survey. So whatever I see, it belongs to me. So the world around us, then I want this, I want that, and then it goes on and on. So there's no stopping there. So because we are in Maya, and then we are not able to get whatever we want, we develop this cheating propensity, or the propensity to be very cunning, try to take it in a very cunning way, so on and so forth. So this cheating propensity is a symptom of us being in Maya, thinking that we are this body and the Lord of all that I survey, and then trying to acquire them. So when we are not able to get that, then we resort to this secondary alternate, which is trying to cheat and then get it again. So, but then the goal is still the same: to acquire, to get, to gratify the senses, and so on and so forth. So this particular thing, and then what are the other two things? We want to enjoy, then we are given certain facilities to enjoy, which is the senses are there, but the senses are imperfect also. Because the senses are imperfect, then we make mistakes in our process. So very first mistake is, because we are in Maya, then we develop this cheating propensity, which is a mistake. So, and then our senses are imperfect, but we think they are perfect. So that's where then it leads to other mistakes. We're so sure of ourselves. We know, yes, I know it is like this and kind of thing. But then we have to realize that our senses are imperfect. So these four things that are very much part of a human being can be understood in this way. And then we are seeing in this particular chapter the various types of pitfalls that are there. How a person can get bewildered by the material world and then behave in a certain way. But then the actual truth of this material world is being brought out in these verses. And this particular verse for today is about marriage. Now, marriage we know is a samskara. In fact, people outside also say marriages are made in heaven and so on and so forth. And what is samskara? Samskara means, actually, if you look at the meaning, it is a purificatory ceremony. So now we have a certain desire, a certain material desire, and the fulfillment of that desire, there is a certain way in which it is channelized, and that is by way of marriage. And so with marriage, then with the sense enjoyment, there are some responsibilities that come, and so on and so forth. So this is how everything is enjoined in the Dharma Shastras. But then we have forgotten this particular thing, and then we very quickly have moved to this position of exploitative mentality. So we try to exploit, we try to see what is the maximum good in it for me. In fact, in the lecture that I was listening to, the acharyas were saying that even looking at the horoscope match and other things is all with respect to one's own self. Will I be happy in this relationship or not? It's not about togetherness. It is not about love. It is not about all these things are all very conveniently ignored or kept aside. And then the duties are also kept aside. The karma aspect is also kept aside, but then they just want to maximize the enjoyment. So they look at these things in that way. So marriages are generally made based on conveniences, and this is the truth that one will have to accept it. I mean, even if one doesn't accept it, that's how most of the marriages happen. I mean, all of the marriages are happening that way only. So to what extent my self-interest is going to be served in a particular alliance by saying yes or no to it is the foremost. And that's how then everything moves on. So that is why there's this interesting word that is being used here, which is called as Vairanubandhan. So it's a combination of two words, Vaira, Vairagya, and then Anubandhan. Anubandhan is relationship or togetherness, and Vairagya is enmity. So this is enmity and togetherness. So it's duality. Like, so there are enemies who are coming together. So that is why in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying this is a marriage of convenience. And this marriage of convenience is not something very specific to Kali Yuga. I mean, it existed in the other yugas also. So that's one thing that we need to be aware of. And then it is just continuing. It's just that it is becoming more and more gross. It is becoming more and more evident. That's all. Maybe in the earlier days, it was in a more subtle level. They had some other interests, as in making sure that, like Arjuna was talking, then he said, it leads to Varna Sankara. So at least those concepts they were aware of. Not having illicit children is not a very good thing. So the institution of marriage was still considered sacred. Even now it is considered sacred. But they think that the institution is marriage is for one's own sense enjoyment and nothing beyond that. So the equation of in this whole equation, Krishna is removed conveniently. And then it is all about self. It is all about self-interest being served and nothing more. And it is for both. It is not just for the man, the bride, or the groom. It is for both. I mean, and then the families who are with it. So everybody looks at it from what's in it for me. I mean, the parents also look at it in whether this will enhance our position and so on and so forth. And then the individuals themselves who are getting married also will look at how will the other person coming into my life going to help me in my gratification of senses, in the position that I hold in the society, or any of those. Gratification can be at not just physical, even in the mind level, where position, status, everything is included. So it's a whole package that way. So what will people think? And then do we make a good pair in the eyes of others? That kind of a thing. So all of those things are looked at. So ultimately, the underlying thing is self-interest, and because of that, there is no love. So if there is no love, then it is enmity, and that is why it is called Vairanubandhan. So there is Vairagya or enmity, and then Anubandhan, which is a relationship. So this is how it is said that the enemies actually are coming together. And because enemies are coming together and each of them is thinking of self-interest, this is naturally going to lead to stress. It is going to lead to anxiety and all of that. So that is why most of the youngsters today are turning away from marriages, because they don't want that stress and anxiety. And then they realize that each one is out to get the other one. They are smart. They realize that. So instead of saying, I don't want marriage, they try to put off marriage. They'll say, no, later on, and things like that. Or even if they are married, it's more like an arrangement that is there, So that there are things, we very conveniently reduced it down to a material activity. And then modern day people have gone one step ahead, and then they have said, like, if it is only the sense pleasures that needs to be, we have a need for each other for a certain satisfaction of certain senses, then why not just stay together? Why go through the activity of marriage and all that and put everybody in inconvenience? So we just go through that. So then that has given birth to many new things which are becoming more popular today, which is about living relationships and so on and so forth. So the moment Krishna is removed, then you can see how each one is conceiving a certain or deriving a certain benefit out of it. And to get that benefit, then they are making an alternate convenient arrangement so that that benefit continues, but then, all the other things are forgotten. So this samskara is being completely destroyed because of self-interest again. So that is why then this is described as Vairanubandhan, which is happening in the modern world today. And then we can understand by now that how marriage is not the coming together of two souls, but it is the coming together of two bodies and nothing beyond that. And each one wanting more from the other or wanting better from the other. So, yeah, and both of them are seeing how I can maximize it. And once this is fulfilled, then they think that is love or there is a relationship. So everything is mixed up so much that it becomes very difficult to understand if there is love or there is no love, or the aspect of Krishna is not there at all. In fact, in ISKCON, there is one book called as The Third Partner, which I think people who want to get into marriage should read, where the third partner is, I think by now, if some of you would have guessed, or maybe some of you have read that book, it means that there are two people in a partnership, that is the boy and the girl, or the husband and the wife, and the third partner is Krishna. So how the third partner is necessary for the proper functioning of the first and the second partner. So that's one thing. Then, in fact, if you look at the in countries like the US and then in Europe, there is something called as prenuptial agreement or something like that. Contract, prenuptial contract. So what happens there is the boy has met the girl or whatever, and then they like each other and they want to get married, which is a big thing because they want to get married. But then they want to protect their self-interest so much that they get into a contract before getting into wedding. And that is called as a prenuptial contract, which talks about what I have is mine, what you have is yours, and how we will go about conducting our lives when we are married, the financial aspect. And then when tomorrow children comes, and who will take care of what, some contract, some agreement they have, which talks about all of this. And then that is signed and then kept so that in case if there is a divorce that happens, then this comes into picture. And then based on these contracts, then the divorce can be settled or whatever. So this way, they want to make sure that their self-interest is protected. And then another important thing is that that in case divorce happens, so they know that, or they are prepared mentally for divorce. So they realize that if things don't work out, then I can always divorce. So there is no problem. There's no great thing about it. So I can always divorce. So that's the mind frame that they have. But in the earlier days, there were no divorces because people accepted the partner as what they deserve. I mean, what they deserve to get, and then they went on with their lives, the suffering or the enjoyment or the mix of both or whatever. However it is, sometimes the dosage of one is bigger than the other, but then they just accepted it because as part of their karma, and then of burning away their karma, and then they were looking forward, and then they were not lamenting or looking backward. Of course, they might have felt sad about it, but then they were able to quickly reconcile and move on. There was no thing of correcting that particular situation through divorce and then remarriage and etc. etc. So that has become the hallmark of today's society. And then, of course, we said that it's a samskara. So there is a ritual that happens. That ritual, whether any religion, the main aspect is how each one is going to stand by the other. There are vows that they, like even in the Christian marriages, they say that till death do us apart, I will hold your hand and things like that. So they take these vows. And then even in our Hindu marriage, we know there's this Saptapadi, the 7 rounds that we do around the fire, and each one is indicative of one particular aspect. So this is how they take their vows, but these are just lip service because they just do it as a showcase for others to see and then comment on or like or whatever. So there's nothing more than that. So in one sense, both of them are cheating each other. And then in fact, if they realize that it is not meeting my expectation, the reality is not meeting my expectation, in most cases, that is how it is, then they immediately try to change the partner. They may not divorce, but then they might have extramarital affairs and so on and so forth. So these are things that we are seeing. So in fact, they are exactly behaving like enemies, scheming at each other and then trying to get the thing. And then here in this particular shloka, it is also said that there are these monetary gains they get married to. So this is like, you have 2 business families in the modern day. They'll say like, okay, I'll give my daughter to your son so that we both can become, we'll become bigger that way. In fact, even in the earlier days, kings used to do that. They used to offer, in case if there was any trouble with a certain king, or they were not sure of the friendship that is there, they want to seal it up by marriage. So they used to send an offer, okay, my daughter is there, I can give it to your son. So let us have this marriage so that we both can become stronger and that kind of a thing. So in this way, personally or materially motivated approach is there for marriage. And that is why Sukadeva Goswami is saying that it is like enemies getting together, and then enemies who are at each other. Because sometimes this aspect of enemy might look like too far or a very strong word, but then in one sense, that is how it is. and then they want to correct themselves because it's only the self-interest that is being served. And the self-interest is because of the ego. And now they also, people realize that, okay, I'll try to better myself and all of this. So whatever we discussed up till now is all because Krishna is removed from the equation. And because Krishna is removed from the equation, they are not able to uh, have a proper concept of what is my role in a marriage, what is expected of me, how a husband and wife should behave, how they can come together to serve Krishna. All these things are not even thought about. But then in Krishna consciousness, thanks to ISKCON, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, there are so many aspects that get discussed here, which is actually the way it has to be. And then it is also talking about how even if you have a desire, it could be fulfilled. It's a samyama, but then you enter into the institution of marriage. And that is why one of our 4 principles, it talks about no illicit relationship. So there can be a relationship, but it has to be under the boundary or the framework of marriage. Or marriage as an institution is still very holy, and it has to be preserved, and it has to be looked at from that perspective. And we find that devotees are looking at it that way. So somebody who wants to who wants to have a partner, wants to get married, and then they want to get married to a person who's also having the same mind, who's also Krishna conscious, so that together then they can serve Krishna, and they can have Krishna conscious children by following other samskaras, and then they can raise Krishna conscious children. So we can see many examples of this in our ISKCON society, which is very heartening to see. I mean, these are away from the normal because most of the time, and then in fact, they don't even look at where that person is coming from and so on and so forth. So there are many examples of such marriages that we can see. And then there are divorce, and then there are, they both work together, and then they try to keep this marriage going. But then there still, even with in such a situation, there are instances where divorces happen. Now, you might ask, I mean, it's not a very idealistic situation, what we are, within ISKCON. Yes, true. It is not very idealistic. In fact, in the purport, I think there is a mention. It says, even in Krishna consciousness, separation and enmity take place due to prominence of material propensities. So here, this is not to say that the whole thing is a waste, but this is just to highlight the fact that material propensities are so strong that even for somebody who's trying to cultivate Krishna consciousness and who has these good intentions in mind, trying to keep Krishna as a third partner and then get into family life and then have Krishna conscious children, raise them, still there can be a toll. This material propensity can take a toll on them, and you might see some separation, some enmities, and all of that. But because here the highlight is that the prominence of material propensities have to be understood in the right perspective. This is not to undermine Krishna consciousness. It's the propensity, our pravriti. It is so strong that even in KC, even after coming in, even after having been initiated, there could be some instances where a person might slip up, which is because of the material propensity. So we have to be so much careful, so much wary of this, and not try to say, oh, I can handle it. I know, like Prabhupada says, one problem with ISKCON devotees is they don't fear Maya sufficiently. This is a statement that is often repeated in various lectures. I mean, even today you can hear. They say that ISKCON devotees don't fear Maya sufficiently. I mean, they think, oh, I'm chanting, so everything will be taken care. So this is itself Maya then again. Maya can trick us in many ways, right? So we have to give it its due and then be aware of the pitfalls that are there, and then how Maya can trick us, and how the material propensities are so strong that even with a convinced mind or a proper intelligence and a convinced mind, sometimes some gaps can appear in that particular shield, and things can go wrong because the propensities are so strong. So we have to be extra careful. in conducting our lives and making sure that we follow the four regulative principles, so on and so forth. So this is how, I mean, this particular chapter or these strong verses will help us to realign ourselves in a way and not develop a very casual view or an attitude and then say that, oh, I can take care. And then that confidence or that overconfidence, which is not going to work for us, has to be noted. And then it has to be looked at in a proper way. Now, if we have to look at it in a proper way, what to do, what not to do, that is something that, I mean, Krishna has talked about that in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, in the 30th verse, he says, Pravritim cha nivritim cha, karya karye ya bhaye, bandham moksham cha ya veti, buddhisa partha satviki. So what he says is, O son of Pritha, that understanding by which one knows what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, what is to be feared and what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating. All of these things, that knowledge, we can understand it properly, but we have to be in the mode of goodness for that. So in the mode of passion or in the mode of ignorance, we will not be able to do that. In fact, that is why we can even conclude that, if we are hearing the Katha, Bhagavat Katha, we will have to hear it with a calm mind. And that is why generally we see, like, whenever there is any Bhagavatam lecture, there is always Kirtan, glorification of the Lord. And then there is always this pranams or the mantras that we talk, which glorify the Supreme Lord, the Parampara and all of that, so that we try to bring to the front the mode of goodness, and then try to take off all those, the mode of passion and ignorance is kind of pushed down. It is there, it's not removed fully, but it's pushed down, and then the mode of goodness is brought up, so that we keep ourselves in the mode of goodness, and then listen to these things so that we'll be able to understand them properly. So it will have the right understanding. Pravritimcha nivritimcha. So what is pravriti? What to do? What is nivriti? What has to be given up? Bhaya, what has to be feared? What is not to be feared? Of course, Maya is one thing that always has to be feared. And then what is binding and what is liberating? Now, marriage, is it binding or is it liberating? It is both. It depends on how we look at it. So binding and yet liberating is how we can look at marriage, if we are able to have the proper understanding and then follow the instructions of the Guru and then the Guru Parampara, the whole arrangement which is there. So like this, and then depend on the Lord for his mercy. So this way, then we will realize, or we will be able to live our lives better. And then always, keep, especially all the verses in this particular chapter, if you say, we'll have to always remember that and then evaluate it properly, because sometimes, we might reject it and say, oh, this is too harsh. It's not like that and all that. But then we have to be aware that it can be even more dangerous than a tiger or a jackal. So it is up to us, or we'll have to what extent we are surrendered, to what extent we are aligned to Krishna, to what extent we have this third partner, and what role that third partner is playing. That becomes very important, so that our life as a Grihastha becomes successful. And then the mercy of the Lord can be seen in the way the things are arranged, in the way the children are growing up, and then in the way they want to settle. That becomes a successful marriage, because then Krishna becomes very pleased that you have brought another soul nearer to him, and that pleases the Lord very much. And then how you conduct yourself, so that you can be an example to others, and then it can be an inspiration. If it's an elderly couple, then they can be an inspiration for others. So in this way, one has a responsibility within ISKCON or within the society that we are part of, in particular, and also to the outside society also, because we can always influence. So people might want to be somebody like you. So trying to make the marriage work, even if there are shortcomings. There will definitely be shortcomings. So it's very easy to find the shortcomings between individuals and then say it's not going to work, and then say it's a disaster or don't get in, and that thing is given. But conclusion is wrong. Maybe then that's not how it is, because you'll never find an ideal husband or ideal wife. That non-exists. But then accepting the faults and then accepting the situation, and then like Prabhupada uses this phrase, making the best use of a bad bargain. Material world itself is like that. So getting into Krishna consciousness, realizing these things and moving ahead should be the way we have to look at it. And these are things that I thought I'll just share. I mean, these were the thoughts that were going on when I was looking at this particular verse, as well as the entire chapter and listening to this to the lecture. So I thought I'll just share that with all of you. And thereby then it gives some hope for us, because accepting the situation and then depending on Krishna, surrendering more, depending on Krishna, so that the outcome is favorable to everyone, including ourselves. So that's how we should lead our lives. And that's how we should look at all these verses that we are seeing in this particular chapter. So even though they are very, very direct, and sometimes, we might develop an aversion to it, or we might reject some of it, but we shouldn't do that, because that's in the Bhagavatam. And we will not get into rejection and acceptance if we are in this sattvic mode and then listen to these things. So on that note, I'll stop here. So today we just discussed about, to summarize, I'm just saying we discussed about the whole chapter, and then how Parikshit Maharaj insisted on a more direct explanation, and that's how then Sukadev Goswami gets into it, and he's giving all of it in a very direct way without holding back anything. So no allegory, no such thing as the direct references are being given. And we can see how Prabhupada is also connecting it so nicely, and then saying how that's the reality that we are seeing. I mean, enemies coming together might look like a disturbing statement in a marriage. But then if you think back and then look, then that's how it is, because we understand how each one's self-interest is being served, even in that coming together. So the wife wants the money, the man wants some sense pleasures, and then some protection. Always it is me first, what's in it for me? And then later on, okay, the other person. But actually living for each other or giving for each other, each one is there for the other. That is not primary, that is secondary. You might still do that, but then the self-interest is served there. Because if I lose this person, then I may not have access to all the things that I'm getting, like money, for example. So if I lose my husband, then the money supply is cut off. So let me put up with it. So the foremost thing is self-interest. And that is why it is described as Vairagya Anubandha. So that's the thing that we saw. And then we also saw a little bit on how, and then we saw examples of how these marriages are happening in the modern world. And then like kings getting married, business partners, and so on and so forth. And sometimes even marriage within family also. No? So the criteria is that the property doesn't go outside of the family. So they have their own reasons, and then they get to that point. So the primary goal is something else, and then the secondary one. So earlier days, the primary was different, and then the other things were secondary. So it has got interchanged now. So we saw that. And then we also saw how, briefly we saw about how devotees will have to look at it, and then how they have to comprehend this whole thing, and then how one has to be in sattvic nature, depending on the Lord, and then help pray to the Lord that we are able to remember these things, and then go about our daily life without hating or without being overtly attached. So that middle path, we all have to tread that middle path always. So treading that middle path can't happen by being judgmental. And so Sattva is very important, and surrendering to the Lord is also important. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much. If there are any comments, go ahead. We'd be happy to hear that. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for giving very nice overview of reality of Grahastha life and how we should be careful, and also you given overview of the marriage life. I think we have a lot of people in my age group who are waiting for their sons or daughters to get married. I think they are all useful tips. Thank you, Prabhu. The devotees may please share your comments or questions or reflections.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranams. Thanks for the wonderful class, Prabhu. And Prabhu, is this a chapter about marriage, or is it they are using marriage as an allegory for some other deeper understanding, Prabhu?
Mataji, the chapter is not about marriage. The chapter is about material world. Material world and the enjoyment there, how it is like the forest of enjoyment it is referred to. So you will have all aspects of material life being discussed in each of these shlokas, and all of them are very direct. And today's shloka was with respect to marriage. Because if you look at only marriage and then try to condemn it, it will look like we are, somebody who's listening might think that, oh, why are we so against marriage? But then if you look at it from a broader view of material world, and then how marriage is one of the components of this material world, and then how, because of the contamination that has happened, it is extended to the institution of marriage also. And so these conclusions are there. And it is not that extension of it has happened only for the Karmi world. It is also for Krishna conscious, or people who are in the Krishna conscious cultivation process or in ISKCON. So Prabhupada mentions that. So there also you might find see these aberrations or a deviation from the normal, which has to be viewed in a proper way. That is because of material propensities are so strong. So we can't ignore them, and we can't ignore Maya. So those are the learnings that come out here. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So this dangerous place of forest, this marriage also we can get misled like that, no, Prabhu?
Correct. Correct.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranams.
Any other comments or reflections from the devotee?
Prabhu, I think there aren't any questions, so we can conclude. And before concluding, I just want to say, I'd like to apologize, and then in case if I knowingly or unknowingly hurt anybody's sentiments or anything, kindly forgive, because it's a very sensitive topic. But we just try to repeat what is told there. So sometimes some of you might have found it very harsh or disagreeable. But my apologies for that. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. We will end today's session with Vaishnava Pranam.
Yes, Prabhu.
Panchakalpatarubhyascha
Kripa Sindhubhyo Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gurudev ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hari Hari Bol. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. Devotees, I will be ending the Zoom session. Thank you.